The rescue beneath Ashfall. The village of Brindle Hollow had long feared the mountain. It rose behind the settlement like a broken tooth against the sky, jagged, black-veined, and perpetually crowned in a wreath of smoke. The elders claimed it had not always been that way. Old carvings in the meeting hall showed a green slope once, trees thick along its spine, goats grazing peacefully in its shadow. But that was before the burn years. Before the sky had turned red for 3 days and 3 nights. Before something vast had claimed the peak. Now the mountain breathed. Not constantly, but often enough. Smoke coiled lazily from its crown in the mornings, thin as incense. At night, dull orange light pulsed faintly through cracks in the rock, like the heartbeat of something sleeping far beneath the crust of the world. Livestock had gone missing along the upper pastures. Shepherd boys swore they heard wings in the fog. Travelers avoided the high ridge road after dusk. Those who didn't sometimes failed to arrive at the next town. The elders called it cursed. The children called it haunted. And the bravest men in the village called it something else when the ale ran strong and the torches burned low. Dragon. Rowan Hale did not use that word lightly. He was not a fool. He had seen scorch patterns in the upper valley that no lightning strike could explain. He had found stones melted into glass along the ridge when he went to quarry iron ore. Once, during a late return from the forge at twilight, he had glimpsed a shadow passing across the mountain face, too wide for a bird, too fluid for falling rock. But speculation did not shoe horses. Fear did not mend plows. So Rowan worked. His smithy stood near the eastern edge of the village square, close enough to the well that he could douse embers quickly if needed. The structure was stone-bottomed and timber-framed, roofed in clay tile darkened by years of soot. The forge itself was his pride, brick-lined double bellows built by his father's hands and improved by his own. He understood fire. Fire was not evil. It was hungry, it was wild, it demanded respect. But it also shaped iron into tools, into protection, into the quiet scaffolding of civilization. That morning began like any others. The sky was pale blue, streaked with thin white clouds. The air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke. Rowan was already awake before sunrise, stoking the coals, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms corded with muscle and marked by old burns. The rhythm of hammer on metal echoed through the square as villagers began their day. Clang, turn, strike. Measured, controlled. Predictable. That was how Rowan liked things. Predictable. The first tremor came just past mid-morning. At first it was subtle, a faint vibration beneath his boots. He paused mid-swing, frowning slightly. The anvil hummed beneath the horseshoe he was shaping. Then the second tremor struck. Stronger. The hammer slipped from his grip and clattered to the floor. Outside, someone screamed. The ground heaved. Not violently, but enough to send a ripple across the well's surface. Buckets tipped. Chickens erupted into frantic motion. A cartwheel rolled unattended down the lane. Rowan stepped out of the smithy just as the earth cracked. A fissure split the grassy edge near the tree line beyond the square. It tore open with a grinding shriek of stone, spitting ash and sparks. Then came the flame. It burst upward in a column, not wide, not sustained, but bright enough to steal breath from every chest watching. Villagers staggered backward. A mother grabbed her child and ran. A man dropped his crate of apples and bolted for cover. And from within the ash and smoke, something fell. It tumbled end over end down the slight slope, hit a rock, rolled again, and came to rest in a coughing heap near the edge of the square. For a moment, no one moved. Ash drifted slowly through the air like gray snow. Then the shape stirred. It was small, far smaller than the stories. Wings, yes, but awkward, too large for its body. Scales the color of molten copper dulled by soot. A long tail twitching weakly against trampled grass. A hatchling. Someone shouted bow. The village hunter, hands shaking but determined, drew an arrow from his quiver. The string creaked. Rowan moved without thinking. He stepped between the bow and the creature. Don't, he said sharply. The hunter stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. It's a dragon. It's a child, Rowan shot back. The hatchling coughed again. A pitiful sound. Not the roar of a terror from legend. Not the triumphant cry of a predator. It was a choking, wheezing noise, followed by a small puff of smoke escaping its snout like an embarrassed apology. It tried to stand. One foreclaw slipped. The right wing dragged awkwardly behind it. Rowan saw it then, the shard. A jagged spike of black obsidian jutted from the thin membrane of the wing, embedded deep enough to make movement impossible. The hatchling hissed, but it wasn't anger. It was pain. Rowan swallowed. His heart hammered so hard it felt like it might crack his ribs. Every instinct told him this was dangerous. Every story he'd ever heard ended in fire. But he had also seen lambs caught in bramble traps. Dogs limping home with thorns buried in their pads. Pain looked the same in any creature. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hands. Palms opened. Empty. It's all right, he murmured. He wasn't sure who he was trying to convince. The villagers muttered behind him. Rowan's get back. You'll be burned alive. It's bait. But he took one step forward. Then another. The hatchling's golden eyes locked onto him. They were enormous in its small face, bright, intelligent. Afraid. He knelt. The ground was warm beneath his knees, heated from the fisher's breath. Up close he could see soot crusted between the creature's scales. Its chest rose and fell rapidly. The shard in its wing quivered each time it shifted. He extended one hand slowly toward the injured membrane. The hatchling tensed. Its tiny jaws parted slightly. Rowan paused. Easy, he whispered. His hands were not gentle hands by nature. They were hands that bent iron. Hands that had broken stubborn horses. Hands that bore scars from slipping tools and bursting coals. But now he moved as though handling spun glass. He grasped the obsidian shard carefully. The hatchling let out a thin, keening sound. I knows, Rowan murmured, I knows. Behind him, the bowstring creaked again. Rowan did not look back. He tightened his grip and snapped the shard free. The sound was small but final. The hatchling squeaked a high, startled cry. Rowan instinctively braced for flame. For teeth. For the end. Instead, the tiny dragon swayed. Then it stepped forward. One claw touched Rowan's boot. The other followed. And before anyone could react, the hatchling pressed its soot-streaked forehead against Rowan's chest. The contact was warm. Not scorching. Just warm. Rowan froze. He could feel the creature's heartbeat. Fast, rapid, frightened. Its breath ghosted against his tunic. A soft rumble vibrated from its chest, not a growl. Something else. The square fell utterly silent. The hunter's bow lowered inch by inch. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Far above, thunder rolled across the mountain peaks. Not sharp, not immediate, but distant. Answering, Rowan slowly exhaled. He lifted one hand, hesitated only a fraction of a second, and rested it gently between the hatchling's shoulder blades. The scales were smoother than he expected. Warmth seeped into his palm. You're all right, he whispered again. The hatchling made a small sound, almost like a hiccup, and leaned harder against him. And deep within the smoke-wreathed mountain, ancient golden eyes opened. Not startled, not enraged, aware, watching. The earth gave a faint, answering tremor, not enough to knock anyone down, but enough to remind them all that something vast still lay beneath the stone. Rowan felt it, felt the weight of attention. His spine prickled. Slowly, carefully, he lifted his gaze toward the mountain. The smoke shifted. For the briefest heartbeat, he thought he saw movement within it, something massive adjusting its position. Measuring, judging, the hatchling trembled. Rowan tightened his hand slightly in reassurance. I won't hurt you, he murmured. The villagers began whispering again. What does it mean? Will more come? Is that its mother? Rowan did not know. He only knew one thing. The creature pressed against him was not a terror. It was lost, and it had chosen him as shelter. That choice felt heavier than any hammer he had ever lifted. The thunder rolled once more, then faded. The smoke thinned slightly at the mountain's peak. The hatchling pulled back just enough to look up at Rowan. Its golden eyes blinked slowly. Trust. Raw and uncomplicated. Rowan swallowed hard. Well, he said quietly, voice rough with something he did not dare name, this is going to complicate things. Behind him, Brindle Hollow stood frozen between fear and awe. Before him stood a creature from legend. And above them all, unseen but very much awake, something ancient watched a human kneel in ash and choose compassion over terror. The mountain did not erupt. The sky did not fall. Instead, the hatchling curled slightly closer. And Rowan Hale, blacksmith of a village that feared fire, wrapped one steady arm around a child of flame. The world did not end. It held its breath. Though attempt, Rowan hid the hatchling in his smithy. It was not a decision made lightly. It was made in the lingering hush that followed thunder, in the uneasy glances of neighbors who had seen too much and not enough, in the long stretch of twilight where fear crept back into brave hearts. He could not leave the hatchling in the square. He could not return it to the fissure, not with its wing torn and its strength barely returned. And so, as whispers spread and doors closed early that evening, Rowan wrapped the small dragon in a thick wool blanket used for cooling forged iron and carried him through the side entrance of the smithy. The hatchling did not protest. It clung. Tiny claws hooked gently into the fabric of Rowan's tunic, not piercing, just holding. Trusting. Inside the smithy, the air was warm and familiar, coal smoke, iron, oil, old leather. Rowan shut the door carefully, sliding the heavy wooden bolt into place. He stood there a long moment, listening. No pounding fists. No shouts of accusation. Only the normal sounds of Brindle Hollow settling into night. He exhaled slowly. Well, he muttered under his breath, glancing down at the bundle in his arms, I suppose we're both fools now. The hatchling blinked up at him. Golden eyes reflecting forge light like twin suns. The secret. The first days were chaos. The dragon, no larger than a sturdy farm dog, could not comprehend stealth. He followed Rowan everywhere. When Rowan crossed to the anvil, the hatchling trotted behind him, oversized wings dragging and occasionally tangling around his own legs. When Rowan fetched water from the barrel, the dragon leaned so far over the rim to inspect his reflection that he toppled in head first. The resulting explosion of steam and sparks nearly gave Rowan a heart attack. Embers and ashes, Rowan grabbed him by the scruff and hauled him out. You cannot sneeze fire into water. The hatchling coughed sheepishly. A tiny puff of smoke spiraled upward. Rowan stared. The hatchling sneezed again. This time 3 sparks popped from his nostrils and fizzled harmlessly against the stone floor. Rowan blinked. Well, he said slowly, I suppose that answers that. The scorch marks began appearing on day 2. A singed corner of a workbench. A blackened line across the floor where the hatchling had attempted to mimic Rowan's bellows. A smoldering patch in a sack of straw that had been mistaken for bedding. Rowan extinguished each incident with increasing efficiency and decreasing patience. You are not a forge, he scolded gently one evening, wiping soot from the dragon's snout with a damp cloth. You are not to test your lungs on my livelihood. The hatchling blinked, then promptly hiccuped a flame the size of a candle wick. Rowan groaned. He told no one. Not when Old Man Harwick from the Livestock Guild knocked at his door asking pointed questions about unusual heat signatures, noticed near the east side of the village. Just working longer hours, Rowan replied evenly. Harwick squinted suspiciously at the faint curl of smoke drifting from the roof vent. You always worked long hours, the old man muttered. Rowan smiled blandly. Harwick left unconvinced, but with no proof. Rowan shut the door and leaned his forehead against the wood. Behind him, something bumped into a rack of horseshoes. Clang! Clatter! Rowan turned slowly. The hatchling stood tangled in a loop of iron, tail flicking irritably as he attempted to free himself. Rowan pinched the bridge of his nose. This, he informed the dragon solemnly, is why secrecy is difficult. A name for fire. He named him Ember on the 3rd night. The hatchling had taken to curling beside the forge once Rowan banked the coals for the evening. Not too close, never touching, but near enough that the residual warmth bathed his copper scales in soft orange light. He would watch the glow for hours. Entranced, Rowan noticed it wasn't merely fascination. It was longing. He had tried twice to guide the dragon toward the wild ridge beyond the village under cover of darkness. He walked halfway up the slope, heart pounding at every shadow. "Home is up there," Rowan had murmured gently. The hatchling had paused, looked toward the mountains. The air had shifted then, like a distant presence stirring. And the dragon had turned away. He had wrapped himself around Rowan's leg instead. Clung stubbornly. Refused to take another step. That was the moment Rowan understood something vital. The hatchling wasn't lost. He had left. Or been forced out. Either way, he had chosen not to return. That night, as the dragon lay beside the forge, Rowan sat on an overturned bucket and studied him. "You can't stay hatchling forever," he said thoughtfully. The dragon's ear frill twitched. Rowan considered the glow of the coals, the faint sparks that sometimes flicked from the creature's nostrils when he sighed. "Ember," Rowan decided quietly. The dragon's head lifted slightly. "Embers," Rowan repeated. The hatchling blinked, then thumped his tail once against the stone. A small approving sound rumbled from his chest. Rowan huffed a quiet laugh. "All right then, Ember it is." The growing bond. Weeks passed. The rhythm of the forge resumed with added complications. Ember learned quickly that Rowan's hammer was not a toy, though he tried more than once to catch the descending arc mid-swing. Rowan narrowly avoided crushed claws each time. Ember learned that quenching troughs were not drinking bowls, after an unfortunate incident involving steam, startled squawking, and a scorched eyebrow. Rowan learned that dragons purred. It happened late one evening. Rowan had been repairing a plow blade long past sunset. Ember lay nearby, chin resting on folded forelegs. When Rowan moved to sit beside him, exhausted, the dragon shifted closer. Then closer still, until his warm flank pressed against Rowan's side. A low vibration began in Ember's chest. Not threatening, not sharp. It was content. Rowan froze. The rumble deepened slightly. He hesitated, then rested his hand gently along Ember's neck. The purring intensified. Rowan stared into the forge light. "Well," he murmured, voice thick, "that's new." Ember pressed closer. From then on, proximity became constant. Rowan rose at dawn, Ember rose with him. Rowan hammered iron, Ember watched, head tilted, memorizing movements. Rowan ate, Ember sniffed suspiciously at vegetables, but devoured meat with enthusiastic chirps. The villagers noticed changes in Rowan before they noticed anything else. He smiled more. Worked later. Seemed distracted but lighter. They assumed it was youth. They did not suspect a dragon slept 10 feet from their well. The morning of the attempt. It began like any other mornings. Coal flared bright under Rowan's careful stoking. The air shimmered faintly from heat. Sweat dampened his brow as he shaped a horseshoe against the anvil. Clang, turn, strike. Clang, turn, strike. Behind him, Ember shuffled about, investigating a coil of rope with suspicious intensity. Rowan tuned out the minor chaos. Until he heard it. Arrarars. The sound was wrong. Not a chirp. Not a growl. Something deliberate. Rowan paused mid-strike but did not turn. Another sound followed. Rob arrarars. He frowned slightly. Ember, if you are about to set something on fire, kindly warn me. Row. The hammer slipped from his grasp. It hit the floor with a dull clang. Slowly Rowan turned. Ember stood in the center of the smithy. Rigid. Wings extended awkwardly for balance. Golden eyes squeezed tightly shut. His entire body trembled, not from fear. From effort. Ruoa, Ember strained. His small jaw worked clumsily. Wands. The sound scraped and rolled and cracked halfway through, but it was shaped. It was intentional. It was. Rowan. The blacksmith stared. The world narrowed to that single word. Ember swayed slightly as though the effort had cost him dearly. Smoke curled from his nostrils in embarrassed spirals. Rowan took a slow step forward. Did you just? Arrarrar, Owens. The second attempt came louder. Less precise. But unmistakable. Rowan's knees nearly gave out. He dropped down in front of the dragon. "You're trying to say my name." Ember's eyes flew open. His tail began thumping against an anvil in rapid metallic percussion. "Arrarrar, out," Ember tried again. The word overshot into a startled squeak. A tiny spark shot from his mouth in surprise. Rowan burst into laughter. Not polite laughter. Not restrained amusement. Full-bodied, disbelieving, overwhelmed laughter that filled the rafters and bounced off stone. Ember blinked, then chirped excitedly, encouraged by the reaction. "Row arvarars row rowus." Each attempt was messy. Growled, broken by draconic throat and fang. But the shape grew clearer. Intent sharpened. Rowan reached forward slowly and cupped Ember's face between his hands. "You are choosing that," he whispered in awe. Ember stilled, watching him. "You aren't copying the sound," Rowan murmured. "You understand it." Ember's chest puffed slightly. Pride. Outside, the mountain rumbled. Low, long. Rowan felt it in his boots. Ember's head tilted toward the sound, but he did not retreat. Did not run. Instead, he turned back to Rowan. "Rowan," Ember forced out one more time. "Rough, imperfect, but whole." Rowan swallowed hard. He had heard stories of dragons speaking ancient tongues, of bargains struck in firelight, of riddles offered by winged sages older than kingdoms. He had never imagined this. A baby dragon standing in his smithy, trying desperately to wrap unfamiliar jaws around a human name. It was not majestic. It was not terrifying. It was vulnerable and profoundly intentional. Rowan rested his forehead gently against Ember. "You don't have to," he said softly. Ember huffed. A warm breath washed over Rowan's face. Then, stubbornly, "Rowan." Clearer still. Rowan laughed again, but this time his eyes stung. "All right," he conceded quietly. "All right, I hear you." Ember chirped in triumph and promptly lost balance, collapsing sideways into a crate of horseshoes with an indignant squawk. Rowan lunged forward. The crate tipped. Iron scattered across the floor. Ember lay upside down, wings tangled, staring at Rowan as if this outcome had been entirely unexpected. Rowan stared back. Then both man and dragon began making undignified sounds that might in another species have been laughter. Outside, the mountain rumbled once more. Not warnings, not angers, something else. Listening. Inside the smithy, among scattered iron and drifting sparks, Rowan Hale realized something profound. Language was not instinct for dragons. It was power. To name was to claim understanding. To speak was to bridge worlds. And Ember had chosen to cross that bridge. Not because he was commanded. Not because he was taught. But because he wanted to. Because somewhere in the furnace-bright heart of a creature born from flame, a human blacksmith's name mattered enough to learn. Rowan reached out and helped untangle the small dragon from the mess. "All right," he murmured gently, "we'll practice." Ember perked up instantly. Slowly, Rowan added firmly. The hatchling grinned, a display still more awkward than fearsome. Outside, Brindle Hollow continued its ordinary day, unaware that within a soot-streaked smithy something extraordinary had happened. A dragon had spoken. Not prophecy, not threat, not ancient decree. A name, and in doing so, had chosen something far more powerful than fire. Connection. The declaration. The soldiers arrived at dusk. Dusk in Brindle Hollow was usually gentle. The sky would soften into amber and rose, the mountain's jagged crown silhouetted against fading light. Smoke from cooking fires drifted lazily upward, mingling with the ever-present haze that curled from the peak. The air cooled, the forge quieted, the village exhaled. But this dusk came armored. The first sign was not the sight of steel. It was the rhythm. Boots, measured, unified, unhurried. Rowan was inside the smithy, finishing the final shaping of a scythe blade, when he felt it through the floor, faint vibrations that did not belong to the mountain. Ember felt it too. The hatchling's head snapped up from where he lay beside the banked forge. His ear frills lifted slightly, his pupils narrowed to thin slits. Rowan paused mid-swing. The boots stopped in the square outside. Then came the knock. Not frantic, not fearful, authoritative. 3 strikes against the smithy door. Rowan closed his eyes briefly. So he murmured. He set the blade aside and wiped his hands slowly on a cloth, buying seconds that would not change what was coming. Another knock. Rowan Hale, a voice called from outside, firm, commanding, used to obedience. Open the door in the name of Lord Carthise. Ember rose silently to his feet. He did not chirp, did not fidget. He moved closer to Rowan's side. Rowan glanced down at him. The hatchling's golden eyes were bright, not confused. Alert! Rowan knelt quickly, lowering his voice. You stay inside, he said quietly. Ember tilted his head. No matter what you hear. The dragon's nostrils flared faintly. Rowan reached forward and cupped the side of Ember's face. You trust me. Ember did not hesitate. He leaned into the touch. Rowan exhaled shakily and stood. He crossed the room, slid the heavy wooden bolt into place behind him, and stepped outside, closing the door firmly. The courtyard was filled. 10 soldiers stood in a semicircle around the entrance to his smithy. Their armor bore the sigil of Lord Carthise, a black stag rearing against a red field. Their shields were damp, coated in river clay to resist flame. Rolled nets hung at their sides, iron threads woven through thick rope. Prepared. Behind them, villagers had gathered at a cautious distance. Faces tense. Whispers sharp as thorns. At their center stood the captain. Older than Rowan by perhaps 20 years, hair gone silver at the temples, eyes hard but not cruel. Rowan Hale, the captain said evenly, we have reports. Rowan folded his arms loosely across his chest, forcing calm into his posture. Reports of what? Scorch marks near your workshop, livestock unsettled, smoke beyond what your forge requires. Rowan shrugged faintly. I work hard. The captain's gaze did not waver. And the tremor weeks ago. A tremor, Rowan replied, we live beneath a mountain. Murmurs rippled through the watching villagers. The captain took one slow step forward. Witnesses claim they saw something fall that day. Rowan's jaw tightened. Witnesses panic easily. The captain studied him in silence. Then, there is a dragon in this village. The words dropped heavy as iron. A collective breath caught among the crowd. Rowan held the captain's gaze. There is no beast here, he said. He hated the lie. But he did not waver. The captain's eyes flicked briefly to the barred door behind Rowan. Stand aside, he said quietly. Rowan did not move. Behind the wood and stone of the smithy door, Ember trembled. The sounds outside were loud, too many heartbeats, too much metal. The scent of iron and unfamiliar sweat seeped beneath the threshold. He could hear Rowan's heart. Vast, tight, afraid. Ember paced. Claws scraped softly against stone. He remembered heat. He remembered smoke. He remembered falling through ash. He remembered pain sharp and blinding in his wing. He remembered hands. Strong, steady, removing the shard. He remembered a sound. Rowan. The door rattled as a soldier tested the latch. Ember's head snapped toward it. Rowan's voice carried through the wood. You will not enter my home without cause. By order of Lord Carthise, the captain replied. The hatchling's breathing quickened. Memory stirred. The mountain. The great presence above him. Expectation. Judgment. He had left. He had chosen. And now, Rowan stood alone outside. Ember stopped packing. His fear shifted. Not vanished. Focused. He moved toward the door. Outside, the captain signaled with 2 fingers. 2 soldiers stepped forward, unrolling a net between them. Rowan saw it. Iron-threaded rope designed to entangle wings. His stomach dropped. You will burn this village if you're wrong, Rowan said quietly. And if I am right, the captain countered. Rowan had no answer. The soldiers advanced. Inside, Ember pressed against the door. He could feel Rowan's back through the wood. He could hear the subtle tremor in his breathing. And something inside the hatchling solidified. Not rage, not instinct. Decision. With a sharp, determined huff, Ember reared back. And shoved. The wooden door burst open with a crack. Rowan stumbled forward as the force from behind him gave way. Gasps erupted from the villagers. The soldiers snapped into motion. Shields raised. Nets lifted. Weapons drawn. And there, framed in forge light and drifting sparks, stood the dragon. Small, copper-scaled. Wings spread wide in a display that might one day freeze armies in terror. Right now, he looked like an angry housecat with ambitions far beyond his size. Ember planted himself squarely in front of Rowan's legs. Teeth bared, tail lashing. A low, unsteady growl vibrated in his chest. Stand down, the captain barked. But his voice wavered slightly. The dragon did not lunge, did not breathe fire. He stood between Rowan and steel. Rowan's heart hammered so loudly he was certain the soldiers could hear it. Ember, he whispered hoarsely. The hatchling's chest expanded. Flame flickered at the corners of his mouth. Tiny tongues of orange light dancing between his teeth. The soldiers tightened their grip. The nets trembled in ready hands. One spark could ignite chaos. One frightened motion could turn the square into an inferno. Ember felt it. The pressure, the fear, the expectation. He could burn. He could defend. He could lash out as instinct demanded. Instead, he turned his head. Slowly, golden eyes locked onto Rowan behind him. The world narrowed. Not to threat, to memory. A voice, patient, laughing, encouraging. Rowan, Ember's jaw worked. His throat strained. Arrarars roas. The soldiers hesitated. The sound did not match the scene. It was not a roar. Not a war cry. It was an effort. Arrarars Rowans. Clearer this time. Stronger. The captain's sword dipped slightly. Rowan felt something inside his chest crack open. Ember, he breathed. The hatchling stomped one claw firmly against the cobblestones. He forced the next word through unfamiliar anatomy. Every ounce of will bent toward shape and sound. Mines. Silence crashed over the courtyard. It was not possessive. Not a claim of dominance. It was not threat. It was declaration. Choice. The dragon chose him. Rowan did not move. Could not. The captain stared at the tiny creature standing between a man and an armed unit of soldiers. You taught it, one soldier whispered. Rowan shook his head slowly. I didn't, he said. Ember turned slightly, still shielding Rowan. His wings trembled not from fear. From determination. Rowan, he repeated stubbornly. The word came smoother now. Worn into place by repetition and intent. The captain lowered his sword fully. A long moment passed. Then another. The nets sagged. The shields dipped. No one, the captain said quietly, almost to himself, teaches a dragon to speak unless it wishes to. He met Rowan's gaze. You understand what you're risking. Yes, Rowan replied without hesitation. And if it grows, then I will teach it what you could not, Rowan said softly, mercy. A murmur swept the villagers. The captain studied Ember again. The hatchling blinked up at him, defiant, unafraid, but not aggressive. The flame at the corners of his mouth faded. He had not burned them. He had spoken instead. The captain stepped back. Stand down, he ordered his men. Reluctantly, the soldiers withdrew their nets. Weapons were sheathed. Boots shifted away from the smithy door. The villagers watched in stunned silence. The captain paused before turning. If this ends in fire, he said quietly to Rowan, the responsibility will be yours. Rowan nodded. It already is. The soldiers departed as dusk deepened into night. Boots faded. Metal ceased its rhythm. The square emptied slowly. Doors closed. Shutters latched. Whispers lingered. Rowan remained standing for a long moment after the last soldier vanished beyond the well. Ember finally relaxed. His wings drooped slightly. He glanced up at Rowan. "Rowan," he said softly. "Perfectly." Rowan dropped to his knees. He gathered the hatchling carefully into his arms. "You stubborn little furnace," he whispered, voice thick with emotion he did not bother hiding. Ember rumbled happily and curled against him, tail wrapping loosely around Rowan's arm. They returned inside. The door shut. The bolt slid into place. Within the fatting glow of the forge, Rowan sat on the stone floor with Ember curled in his lap. Outside, night claimed the mountain. Far above, within smoke and ancient stone, something vast watched. It had witnessed fear before. Had witnessed destruction. Had witnessed men raise steel and cry war. Tonight it witnessed something else. A dragon choosing restraint. A human choosing courage. A word spoken instead of fire. The mountain did not tremble. It did not send storm or flame. It watched, and did not descend. Inside the smithy, Rowan rested his forehead gently against Ember. "You didn't have to do that," he murmured. Ember made a soft, questioning sound. Rowan smiled faintly. "But I'm glad you did." Ember's breathing slowed. The events of the evening drained from him at last. Before sleep claimed him, he murmured one final word. "Rowan, soft, certain, chosen." Rowan closed his eyes. Humanity was not loud. It did not roar. It did not scorch the sky. It knelt in ash. It removed the shard from a wounded wing. It offered a name without demand. And sometimes, if the world was fortunate, a dragon chose to say it back.